اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Before going into looking at Arabic words, I want to quickly take a tour of the alphabet. The Arabic alphabet, we are familiar with the English alphabet, I'm sure, and there are 26 letters in the English alphabet. Now, they're made up of two things, consonants and vowels. A, E, I, O, U are actually vowels. What's the difference? Well, the most important thing to note is that if I have just consonants on their own, I cannot make a meaningful word in the English language. P, T, if I were to add anything else on there, B, C, D, F, G, whatever consonants I add, I'm not going to make any word. In order to make words in Arabic, in English, I need to combine that with vowels. So for example, if I were to put A in between, I get pat, as in pat somebody in the back. If I were to put a E in between, I get pet, as in my pet rhinoceros. I don't have a pet rhinoceros, but you get the idea. If I put P-I-T, I get pit, as in a pit of fire, for example. P-O-T, pot of noodles, or P-U-T, put it down. So you can see now, by using a combination of consonants and vowels, I'm producing words in the English language. So what about Arabic? Now, the Arabic alphabet has, if you look at the screen there, I have laid out the letters for you. First thing I'd like you to do is, if you don't mind, is to count the number of letters in the Arabic alphabet. Now, to make life easy, I have put them in rows of 7. 7 times 4 is 28. So there are 28 letters in the Arabic alphabet. Please take a close look at them and see if there's anything different here from what you're used to when you studied or when you first learned to read Arabic. Take a close look, inshallah, and we'll come back in a second. Few points to compare and contrast between the Arabic and the English alphabet. Now, in English, of course, we have letters which are made up of being consonants and vowels coming together. In Arabic, every single letter of the alphabet is actually consonant. There are no vowels in the Arabic alphabet. The second thing you may have noted is that the order may be slightly different than the way you have memorized. For example, you may have memorized them, the last line, Lam, Mim, Nun, Waw, Ha, Hamza, Ya. But I put here Ya right at the end, but before that I put Wow. Now, the reason why I've done it in this way is just this is the dictionary order of the letters. So if you go to the Arabic dictionary, you'll find the last letter is Ya and the one before that is Wow. So that's one point. The second thing you may have noticed, there is no Hamza here. Hamza is actually the first root letter of the Arabic alphabet. You'll note that, inshallah ta'ala, in the Arabic dictionary. So this is the few differences, but the most important point to note is that there are no vowels. All are consonants. Inshallah, we look at where we get the vowels from. Now, the number of letters in the Arabic alphabet, there is a difference of opinion among scholars. Some scholars give the count as 28 because they do not count the Alif as a letter of the alphabet. They say the Alif is not a proper letter and does not function like a consonant, which we will see in a second. Others say, no, it is the letter of the alphabet. So those that count Alif as well as Hamza, they will say the number of letters is 29. Otherwise, it is 28. So this is the important points about the alphabet, which you may or may not have known when you first learned to read. I want you to note a few very important points about Alif, which again is not made clear when we begin to learn to read Arabic, which will be very useful for you in your language study. The first thing to note that in Arabic, Alif can't be the first letter of a word. Second thing, Alif can't take a vowel sound. Now, what do I mean? It cannot be the first letter of a word. Now, sometimes in Arabic, I'm sure you will all tell me that this is wrong because you've seen Alif at the beginning of a word. So, for example, we have here Alhamdu. Alhamdu looks like an Alif at the beginning. Or let's do another one. Ism, name, looks like an Alif at the beginning. Or let's do another word. Akala, he ate. So in all of these three, it looks like we have Alif at the beginning. For your information, this is not Alif. Whenever you see something looks like an Alif at the beginning of a word, the first character, this is actually Hamza. There are two types of Hamza in Arabic, Hamzatul Wasl, Hamzatul Qat. Please don't worry about the terminology. Hamzatul Wasl only appears at the beginning of a word. So if you see an Alif at the beginning, it's most likely Hamzatul Wasl, but it can be the normal Hamza which you see in Akala. What do I mean by taking a vowel? Well, Alif cannot take any of the vowel signs in Arabic or the sound. For example, A U or E. So Fatha, Dhamma or Kasra, or if you learn them as Zabur, Pesh or Zer, Alif cannot take it. So if you see an Alif, what looks like an Alif with a vowel sign, that is not Alif, that is actually Hamza. So what does Alif do? Well, Alif acts as a chair for Hamza. Alif, one of the functions of Alif is that it acts as a chair. It acts as a chair for Hamza. So you will see Alif being used as a chair for Hamza. Let's take 3 examples. Akala, he ate. Sa'ala, he asked. And let's do another one. Qara'a, he read. So you can see here at the beginning of the word I have Alif, it looks like an Alif. In the middle I have what looks like an Alif, and at the end I have what looks like an Alif. In all those 3 circumstances, it is Hamza, not Alif. Please note that important point, and this causes a lot of confusion with new students. Whenever you see a Alif with a vowel sign on top, it is Hamza. Okay, and Hamza can be, of course, at the beginning, middle, or end. Now, what is confusing about Hamza is that Hamza can be written on an Alif, which you can see the example. It can also be written on a Waw. So, for example, let's do this word. It's very common. Mu'min. Now, Mu'min means a believer. Mu'min, the word in the middle, you see Waw. This is not Waw. This is Hamza. Okay, Mu'min. So, you've got to read it as a Hamza. And let's take another word, Su'ila. Okay, was asked. Su'ila. Now again, in the middle, it looks like a ya. This is not ya, this is Hamza. So Waw, Alif and Ya can be also used as a chair for Hamza. The other use of Alif, which is also it shares with Waw and Ya, is that it can be used as a long vowel. Long vowel. Please don't confuse that with short vowel, which is something different, which we'll look at in a second. So for example, I have here very famous word, which you'll learn very soon. Kitab. So you can see in the middle, there's an Alif. This Alif is not Hamza. This Alif is actually Alif and it's been used for elongation. Kitab. Then we take another word. Okay, this means messenger. Rasul. Again, the Waw is used here for elongation. There's another word, Kabir. Easy word, inshallah. Kabir, which means big. Again, you can see Ya. Before it, Ya with sukun. Before it, a kasra, kabir, big. Waw, before it, a dhamma, waw with sukun, rasul. And then, of course, the first example, fatha, followed by an alif. So, alif before it, fatha, and we read elongated sound, kitab. So, this is the 2 purposes of alif. One is that it can act as a chair for Hamza. Spell that right. Chair for Hamza. Or it can be used as a long vowel along with Waw and Ya. This is very, very important. There are some other uses of Alif. We will look at them inshallah ta'ala when at the appropriate time. But these are few things that are not usually taught when, of course, when we learn to read Arabic. And these things are going to play a very important role in your understanding of Arabic, particularly when it comes to word patterns. We need to be able to tell whether the word is the letter is Hamza or Alif, otherwise we will mistranslate. So please make a note of these points if you did not know them. They're there for your benefit, inshallah ta'ala. So since none of the letters in the Arabic alphabet are vowels, so where do we get vowels from? So let's take a look at a word which I've taken from the Quran, and this has 3 consonant sounds, kaf, ta, and ba. I'm sure you can see them. Now there is no way in the world I can actually pronounce this word because I don't know what vowels to apply. In the Quran, if you go to this word, you'll find here that is written like this, ku-ti-ba. Kutiba, written down or prescribed. That's what the word means. Now that I've added these vowel symbols, I can now read this word, kutiba. And this is the reason why we non-Arabic speakers cannot read Arabic text, because it's not voweled. Until and unless you know the rules for applying the vowels, know the morphology, know the sentence structure, you'll not be able to read Arabic text without vowels. Now, alhamdulillah, when it comes to Quran, we don't need to make any such effort. Alhamdulillah, everything in the Quran is beautifully marked. And long as we spend some time learning the basic rules, we can read Quran correctly, inshallah, without making any mistakes. So what are these things called, these symbols? Now, there are many names given to them. They're literally called movements in Arabic. Harakah, singular. Harakaat, plural. Again, don't worry about them. Just call them vowel symbols for now. Don't make a list of terminology to memorize. So haraka, harakaat, plural, literally means movement. Why? Because it moves the sound. U, like this, around. A lifts it up and E drags it down. And these are the three that I'm sure you know from your reading of Arabic. So the names given to these are Dhamma, Fatha, Kasra, and Sukun. Okay. Now, the first three are actually vowels. The other one is absence of vowels. So let's quickly look at the first example. Now, Dhamma, you may have learned it as Pesh. Doesn't really matter what you call it, but the Arabic name for it is Dhamma. So we'll start with the Arabic names. Dhamma. And it literally corresponds to the U sound in English. So put, as in put sound, U. And I've added it to the word here, Al-Muslimu. Al-Muslimu, which you can see at the end. Now, in the next example, I'm going to use a Fatha at the end. And Fatha corresponds to the English A sound, above, above. So I put a Fatha here and I read this word as Al-Muslima. So the first one I read Al-Muslimu, this one I read Al-Muslima. And the third one, I put a Kasra and I'll read this one as Al-Muslimi, with the Kasra E sound as in the English if. Now, on the fourth example, which I have, now if you look at the scene there, which I've got, there is no vowel sound being applied. So I'll put here a Sukun, Mus. Okay, so there is no vowel being applied. There's no U, A, or E sound being applied. This one is read Al-Muslimu. So Mus, if you're just reading this that part, Mus. So there is no vowel applied. So these are the three vowels in Arabic, U, A, E type of sound. And then we have the absence of any vowel sound. And this is called the Sukun. The others are called Dhamma, Fatha, Kasra. Please don't worry if you learned them as Zabar, Zer, Pesh. That's fine for now, inshallah. Now, one quick point about the Sukun is there's two different ways of written. You'll find them in the scripts written. One, what looks like a squeezed C, you know, as if the C is being squeezed, like so. And the other, of course, looks like a circle. Now, when I'm writing on the screen, it's quite a bit of a challenge writing. I'm writing the Dhamma, for example, and then I'm writing the, see, there might be some times when you confuse the two. So again, my handwriting on the screen is relatively bad as it is, but just to make life easy, I'm going to write the Sukun in this format, like an inverted V, just to make sure that there is no confusion when I'm writing the text on the screen. I'll try to reduce as much as I can, but it's quite a challenge on the screen. So please note these three vowel signs which are used in Arabic, and I'm sure I'm confident that you know them, and they help us read text. And without that, we cannot make any progress in the Arabic language. So we'll be focusing in this course all text with the vowels above and below written down. And alhamdulillah, you can already read that, so you'll be able to make progress in your study of Arabic. Another set of markings that are absolutely essential for Quranic Arabic are called tanween. I'm sure you know tanween is really doubling of the letters, vowels in writing. So for example, we have two dhammas coming together, two fathas coming together, two kasras coming together in writing. So you'll see them with this symbol, which I'm sure you're already familiar with. Now, what it does in reading, it produces an N sound at the end. So for example, muslimatun. So you can see the un sound being applied, and I've written it down in transliteration here to make it easy for you to recognize it. Muslimatun. And then in the next example, you'll see an sound with the two fathas, you get muslimatan. Again, you can see an an sound coming at the end. And then in the last example with the two kasras, I've got muslimatin. And again, you can see an in sound. These are called tanween, and in English grammar books, you'll find the word nunation. Nunation to describe what they are. So these are the terms used in the grammar books. But again, we need to know this symbol because it's going to play a huge role in your Arabic study. So what is tanween? In essential terms, tanween is really adding a noon sukun sound at the end. So please pay attention to this, inshallah. Muslimatun. So you can see that I've added a, let me try and highlight that. So I've added a tun sound, noon sakin sound at the end, and this is tanween. Okay, this is essentially what it is. Of course, the correct way of writing is with the tanween, but this is opened up for you. And we're going to be opening it up when it comes to deeper study of Arabic. And I wanted to highlight this point right from the exam, from the beginning. So tanween is really adding a noon sakin sound at the end. I'll just copy and paste the next example. Tan, and we have tin. So we have muslimatun, muslimatan, muslimatin. So which you can see here, an N noon with a sukoon sound added at the end, and this is tanween, and it's going to play a huge role in your Arabic study. If you change the tanween around, you'll completely mess the sentence up, and therefore right from the beginning you need to be able to use the tanween correctly. Inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to show you how to do that. So I wanted to again highlight this very important marking again to help us correctly read the Arabic text. Few other markings which are commonly used in Quranic script, which you need to be familiar with. One is called Shaddah, and this is used in normal Arabic also. When I say normal Arabic, modern standard Arabic, we have Shaddah. So darrasa, okay, you could note, is exactly the same as if I was going to write this. Darrasa. So the first letter has a sukoon, the second letter has the symbol. It could be fatha, dhamma, or kasra, whichever one it is. But that is the shadda. Shadda is the doubling of the letter. And we have it in English where we actually write the letter. So you got this type of sound, butter, B-U-T-T-E-R. Of course, in Arabic, I don't repeat the letter. So that's what darrasa does. And this is the shadda symbol, which is commonly used in Arabic script. The next symbol, it looks like a line on the top of a letter, usually written like so. In the Indian subcontinent, we refer to it as khara zabar, but in the Arabic terminology is called Dagger Alif, standing Alif, shortened Alif, etc. Don't worry about the name, but what's important, what it does. Now, this symbol is very rarely used in modern standard Arabic. It's actually used in Quranic script only, primarily, and therefore I think we need to have a look at what this symbol actually does. Now, if you look at this word here, I have for you, first word is Malik, and then we have another word here, Malik. Now, the first word, Malik, means king. But if I elongate the sound, Malik, I completely change the meaning of the word. Now, the word actually means owner or master, and this is used in Surah Al-Fatiha. Now, instead of writing the version here, which I have in purple, let's change the color. I can also write this word like so. Okay, so I can also write with a meme with a line afterwards. It's exactly the same pronunciation, Malik. So this standing alif is a replacement of writing an alif. So standing Dagger Alif, you want to call it that. It gives that the elongated sound, Malik, and it's used quite extensively in the Quran, and you need to know what that is. The third symbol, which I'm sure you might be familiar with, this is called Hamzatul Wasl. Now, Hamzatul Wasl in Arabic, normal Arabic, is not written like so. In the Quranic script, in some of them, you'll see a small sword-like symbol, which you can see here. For example, Alhamdu. Alhamdu. You'll see this is Hamzatul Wasl. So in Quranic script, in some of them, it's marked very clearly. In normal Arabic, you will not see that. It'll be simply Alhamdu, and you're supposed to know that there is Hamzatul Wasl. If you don't know, you can't read that correctly. So these are things you're going to learn, inshallah ta'ala. But most important thing, which I mentioned earlier to you, if you can recall, that an alif cannot be the first letter of a word. If you see it, it has to be Hamza. Either it is Hamzatul Wasl, which is this one is, or it is the normal Hamza. So please note that Hamzatul Wasl symbol, alhamdulillah, in Quranic script is relatively easy to recognize, and the reading rules for Hamzatul Wasl, I'm sure you know it, but in the appropriate section I will briefly go through it one more time. So these are the markings that we use in the Arabic language. We have the consonants, then we have the vowels, we have the tanween, and few others. Some of them I highlighted here for you are used to represent words in Arabic. Arabic words. Now, in order to represent words in writing, we could use a combination of the letters, which are consonants, plus some markings which go above and below the letters to represent words. Now, whatever a human being utters is called lafdhun, utterance. And this utterance, according to the scholars of Arabic, is divided into two parts. One is called mawdu', which means meaningful, and the other is called meaningless. Now, the good news is, alhamdulillah, we have no interest in the meaningless at all, because there's not a single meaningless word in the Quran or the Hadith. So our focus of study will only be in the meaningful. The scholars divide the meaningful again into two logical parts. One is that a meaningful can be a single word. A single word. A human being can utter a single meaningful word called a kalima. or they can utter a sentence or a phrase called murakkab, a construct, meaning a grammatical unit which they can utter, which is made up of 2 or more words. So a human being's utterance meaningful is divided into 2: kalima, single word; murakkab, a construct. And we're going to begin our study from this point onwards. In English, we have the following parts of speech: nouns, pronouns, adjective, adverbs, interjections, verbs, preposition, and conjunction. This is generally agreed to be the parts of speech. That means every single word in the English language, if you were to gather them together in a computer database, you'd be able to put them into these columns. Every single word in the English language will fall into one of these parts of speech. So in English, we have 8 parts of speech. 8 parts of speech. What makes the study of Arabic significantly easier is that we have only 3 parts of speech. We have fa'lun, which is similar to a verb, and we have harfun, which we can call for now particles, but they include interjection, prepositions, etc. And then we have the biggest category called ismun or ism, which includes nouns, pronouns, adjective, adverbs, interjection. For the purpose of our study, until we get familiar with the Arabic terminology, we're going to call ism noun plus, because it includes lots of categories. And the fa'lun we're going to call verb. And the last one, particle, we're going to call harf, until we become used to the Arabic terminology. So in English, we have 8 parts of speech. In Arabic, we have only 3. One of the biggest fears students have, particularly adults, of learning a new language is the fear of vocabulary. Now, Arabic is a very rich language, very, very rich language. It has millions of words compared to English, where we have about 600,000 according to some scholars. And some scholars Arabic claim that there are 3 million, some even claim up to 12 million words. So it's a very comprehensive language. Our target is not the language. Our target is to understand Quran. And just to prove to you how easy it is, I've created a list of set of words, which I called your golden set. And if you learn these sets of words, inshallah, not only the words themselves, but how to use them, you'll get a huge leap in vocabulary. And let me prove that to you now, inshallah, in the next slide. Now we have in this golden set, I've got 7, and at the bottom I've got the verbs. Let's go through them quickly. The first set I call the Muslim table. This really isn't vocabulary, but it's really patterns of words. And I'm also already mentioned morphological patterns to you. If you learn how to form the Muslim table, which is 18 words, and if you double it, you get 36 with the definite version, you'll be able to recognize thousands of words in Arabic which conform to this pattern, and immediately you'll be able to tell me whether it is singular, dual, plural, masculine, feminine, whether it's definite or indefinite, whether it has the status of rafa, nasab, or jar. Lots of information just from the pattern. And inshallah, by lesson number 5, I'm confident you'll get there. Now, the second list that we have is called the detached pronouns. They are very similar to the English personal pronouns, where we say you, I, he, and she, etc. So these are detached pronouns in Arabic, and they're used in the Quran 1400 times. 1400 times. The next list we have attached pronouns. They are similar to the English him or his. And they appear in the Quran about 8,000 times. A lot more than 8,000, but in the patterns I'm going to teach you, at least 8,000 occurrences you'll be able to recognize. And these are called attached pronouns. Why? Because they're always attached to a word. The fourth set are called pointing words. Now, these are words like in English, this, that, these, those, that kind of meaning. And they are used in the Quran 1,049 times. Number 5 is called relative pronouns, and they're used in the Quran 3,500 times. And number 6 on your list are no longer ism. We're going to the next category, harf, and they are used in the Quran about 13,000 times. These are particles of jar, which we are going to be studying in this course. And then the 7th category we have on the list is another set of harf, and they are called Inna and her sisters, and there are 6 of them, and they're used in the Quran about 2,200 times. Now, I hope you can see from here, if you just do a rough calculation of the numbers, we are going way above 25,000. Now, the good news is there are only, and I repeat, there are only 78,000 words in the Quran. 78,000, give or take. So the rounded up 78,000 words. In this list alone, you have nearly 25,000 odd words of Quran. And it is, if when you learn these sets, your golden set, along with how to use them, which is more important, you will get more than a quarter of the words of Quran, inshallah ta'ala, just from this sheet. Now, let me introduce you to the verb patterns. When we talk about morphology, we're talking about patterns of verbs. Now, Arabic verbs conform to certain patterns. There are quite a few, but if you learn 10 of them, if you learn 10 patterns of verbs, you'll get almost 19,000 verbs in the Quran that you can recognize. You add that now to your 25, you almost got more than 50% of the words of Al-Quran just on one sheet of paper. And of course, in the other introduction sessions, I've already mentioned that if you learn just the Arabic of your Salah, you will get almost 40,000 words of Al-Quran. So vocabulary really isn't your challenge. And this is why I've created the goals and said, please keep a copy, make a note of it. Inshallah, just note the numbers. And as you go through the course, along with the map, you'll have this sheet. And inshallah ta'ala, we're going to be studying them in detail. So number 1, we will study between lesson 1 and 5. Number 2, we'll introduce in lesson number 5 and keep on practicing. Number 3, we're going to introduce from lesson onwards after that. And number 4, 5, 6, 7, all of them is going to have dedicated lessons because you really need to understand how to use these sets. Without that, you cannot make any progress in Quranic Arabic. So not only have I got a map for you, but I've also got a golden set of vocabulary to remove any fear of Arabic vocabulary that you may have. So there will be no endless list to memorize. Only thing I'm going to ask you to do is to memorize a limited amount, and inshallah ta'ala through practice you will acquire the rest. Biggest challenge you will have is if you have a list of 500 words or 1,000 words and you try to memorize them, and you will fail. System does not work. The only way you can acquire Quranic vocabulary is by reading the Quran and studying it, and that's the easiest route, inshallah ta'ala. And alhamdulillah, as a Muslim, it should be our daily habit. So in conclusion, brothers and sisters, every word in the Arabic language will either be an ismun, fi'lun, or harfun. That's all I want you to know. If you can't remember those 3, just remember them as noun plus verb and particle. That means if I were to go to the Quran and I open any page, I should be able to recognize every single word and be able to put them into one of these 3 columns. One of your major achievement. If you achieve this, alhamdulillah, you've made an excellent progress. So this is a target for yourself. If you can, through these courses or any other study, if you come to a position where you can recognize every single word in a page of Quran or a line of Quran, and you can identify that there are so many words there and what those words are, is it an ism, fi'l, or harf? Remember, there's no fourth. Then you've made a huge leap in your Arabic study. So your first goal is to identify every single word of Quran and know whether it is an ismun, fi'lun, or harfun. And I'm confident, inshallah ta'ala, by the time we get to level 1, the end of level 1, inshallah, you will be 90% there. 90% of the words of Al-Quran, you should be able to tell me immediately, that's an ism, it is a fi'l, and that is a harf. And how do the ism work, how do fi'l work, and how do harf work? This is your job, inshallah ta'ala, and we will do that systematically. And again, this introductory session, though not actual study, I wanted to give these pieces of information to you to remove this fear. Otherwise, you start a journey and you study for 2, 3, 4 years, and then you can't even translate one ayah of Quran. What is the benefit of that? So this is what we want to go, clear roadmap, and again, removing some of the misconceptions and fears from our heart and mind. So in Arabic, there are only 3 types of words, and every word of Quran will either be an ism, fi'l, or harf. And that's all you need to remember in the introductory session. Let's take a look at harf. We'll define each one briefly in this introductory session. What is a harf? Now, harf is a meaningful word in Arabic, which is usually a very short word made up of 1, sometimes 2 letters, few addition to that. So here are some examples for you. Bi means in or with. Al means the definite article. Please make a note of this one as we'll be using it straight away in our studies. Min means from. Ala means on. Fi means in. And inna means indeed. Aw means or, wa means and fa means so or thus. One of the most important things to realize about harf, this category, singular harf and plural huruf. Okay, we're going to translate as particle. And what is important, these words are very important in the language. Even though they're very small, they have a very powerful impact. Their real meaning can only be understood when they're used in context with a verb or an ism. On their own, they will not really yield us many meaning. For example, if you were to say to me, Assalamu alaikum, brother, I say, Wa alaikum assalam. You say, how are you? In, I reply. Where are you? In. What are you doing? In. No matter how many times I say the word in, you're not going to be any wiser. But if I say, I'm in a hurry, I'm in work, then you have a lot more clearer what I mean by the word in. So again, the actual meaning of them comes out in the context. And this is where a big area of confusion. As a student will ask, what does be mean? And I say in. Then I'll say with. Another time I say because, and you get confused. Why are you translating it differently in every occasion or in different occasions? I will say it is because of the context. And we do the same thing in English. Don't worry about it. Prepositions generally in every language has their own beauty and their own way of doing things. And you have to translate it according to the rules of English, not according to the rules of Arabic when you're translating from Arabic to English. So remove the confusion that you get one word with lots of meaning in English. It is simply to do with the way the English language works. So this is harf. Most important thing to note, they're very small words, very powerful in the language, but their real meaning will come out when you use them in context. And as part of our golden set, they are going to be taught, inshallah, 6 and 7 will give us a huge amount of vocabulary, almost 15,000 words of Al-Qur'an. Of course, there are other sets beyond 6 and 7. We'll be studying them systematically as I go through the course. But most important thing about this course, I brought the most common things first, and also the structure the most common first, so that inshallah you get a quick leap in your study. You're not spending hundreds of hours studying and then you can't translate Quran. Okay, so let's go to that, inshallah ta'ala. 6 and 7 are examples of harf. Our next category is fi'lun. Fi'lun is exactly same as in English, which when we say a verb. A verb is a word that gives us some meaning, but most important thing about a verb, it has a tense, always has a tense, past, present or future. Without a tense, there is no verb. So even if the word means action, which a verb does, if it does not have a tense, it will not be a verb. Let me give you an English example. For example, if I say, I like eating ice cream. The word eating here is not a verb. But if I say, I am eating an ice cream, now the word eating is a verb. Why? Because there is a tense. So when the word describes an action but does not have a tense, it is not a verb. So in Arabic, you must have a tense, no verb. Please remember that, inshallah ta'ala, as far as verbs are concerned. Very, very important information regarding verbs. Here are some examples of verbs from the Quran, which you should be very familiar with because you use them every day. A'udhu, I take refuge. Na'budu, we worship. Nasta'inu, we ask for help. An'amta, you bestowed favors. Ihdina, guide us. Again, these are very common verbs which you use daily, and these are verbs. All of them have got the meaning of an action, but also they have a tense. Without tense, they will not be verbs. And as also mentioned about the golden set, we're going to study verbs really in patterns. And rather than giving you an endless list of verbs, which are available widely, you can get quickly a list of all the verbs in the Quran and you will not be able to make any sense of it. So inshallah, I'm going to teach you how to understand the patterns and how to translate correctly. Every verb in Arabic has so much detail. And inshallah, when you know which each part is, you'll be able to understand it, translate it, put it into context, and so forth. So again, we'll approach verb study in detail and the appropriate verb section of the lesson. In the first part, we'll focus on ism and harf. The last category is ism, but not only the last, but most important category. And let me briefly give you its definition. Ism in Arabic is very, very comprehensive. Now, normally what happens when you study Arabic, you get a grammar book and you look at ism, they say it's a noun. And as an English speaker, you're confused from day one. Because in Arabic, noun is not an ism. Ism is a lot more than a noun. So an ism in Arabic comprises a lot of categories of words in the English language. Ism singular, asma plural. Now in Arabic, the word ism normally means a name. But in grammar, it has its own meaning. It means a meaningful word that does not have a tense. So if it has a tense, it's a fi'l. If it does not have a tense, it is most likely to be ism, unless, of course, it falls into the harf category. The important thing to note about it, when you compare with English, it includes nouns, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs, and interjections. And here the confusion. If I told you the ism means noun, and then I say pronoun is also an ism, you're going to get confused. So right from the beginning, remove that from your mind and understand that it's a very comprehensive sort of word. So in Arabic, pronouns, which are treated separately in English, rightly so, adjectives are treated separately, are all part of the ism category, and they have the set of rules which apply to ism. Inshallah, we'll study them from next lesson onwards. So it can be the name of a person, an animal, place, thing. It can be a name of an action without the tense. It can be an idea, emotion, feelings, etc., etc., etc. The way I explain to my students is very easy. If you want to think of what an ism is, you look at the word. If it doesn't fall into the verb category, if it doesn't fall in the particle category, it's an ism. So very simply, if you imagine there are 3 columns and you got no other choice, okay? 1, 2, and 3. If the word does not fit into 3, it does not fit into 2, then it must fit into 1. So ism is basically everything in Arabic that is not a verb, fi'l, or a particle, harf. That is the most important thing to note. It is very comprehensive, and therefore it's very important to study an ism. Now, if you remember, I mentioned one of your key goals in studying Arabic is to be able to tell every single word of Quran. Whether is it an ism, is it a fi'l, or is it a harf? I'm going to give you 3 symbols which are very easy for you to recognize an ism. If you see these 3 things on any word, you can be 100% sure it is an ism. So if the word ends with tanween, remember I mentioned the tanween in the alphabet section. If the word ends with tanween, and tanween only appears at the end of a word, an, in sound, you can be 100% sure that word is an ism. A verb will not have tanween. A harf will not have tanween. A fi'l and harf, verb and particle, cannot have tanween. The second sign is ta marbuta. Now this is called the round ta. We'll explain that inshallah and when we speak about gender in more detail. If it has that at the end of a word, it is an ism. A verb will not have that, nor will a particle. And the last important one is al, the definite article in the Arabic language, which means the, the. If you see that at the beginning of a word, that word is an ism. Now, that does not mean that every word in Arabic will have all these 3 signs. No. Every ism, I mean, will have all these 3. No. What it means is that only an ism can have it. So there will be some isms that will not have these 3 signs, but only an ism can carry one of these 3 signs. So if you see it in a word, you can assume it's an ism. So the biggest task of recognizing words, you've got, alhamdulillah, a huge leap by which you can recognize almost, I would say, about 80% of the isms that you're likely to come across. So let's take a look at some examples of ism. I've categorized them according to English, just a few examples. So we have nouns, for example, Hamid, Maryam, Makkah. These are not translated into English because they're proper nouns. So Hamid is the name of a person, Maryam, name of a person, Makkah, name of a place. Then I have Al-Qalamu, the pen. And then I have Kutubun, books. For example, here, books. Haqqun, truth. Ayah, ayah of Quran. So these are all nouns, common and proper nouns. Then we have pronouns. Now pronouns are quite a range in Arabic. They're all categories of ism. So for example, huwa, he or she, hada, this, alladhina, those who. So again, we have pronouns as well as that category. We have adjectives describing words. Kabir, big. Saghira, small. Ba'id, far away. Qarib, near. And then we have also adverbs. For example, qabla, before. Ba'da, after. Baina, between. Inda, again adverbs. Of course, I can add I can add a bigger list to this, but just as an illustration purposes, you'll see a range of words, isms here, that are commonly used in the Quran. Important thing to note, not all of them have tanween, not all of them have al, not all of them have ta marbuta at the end, but only an ism can have. And again, from the list, you'll be able to recognize, for example, here, tanween, ta marbuta and tanween, and we have tanween here, tanween there as well, and we have al here, another ta marbuta there. So if you see those, you can immediately assume that it is an ism. الذي علم